everyone, it's Jananie and welcome to another episode of #EpicBookRecs. So this is a monthly series that I do here on the Epic Reads channel where I recommend a bunch of YA books based on a certain theme. So we've done a ton of fun and exciting themes before, so go check out the links in the description to see the previous videos. But today's theme is one that I'm very excited about because I've read a bunch of books recently that have fit this theme and I'm just really excited about that. But the theme for this month is retellings. So traditionally when we think of retellings, we think of fairy tale retellings, which are some of the books that I'm going to talk about today. But I also wanted to include retellings of other stories, not just fairy tales. So this is going to be a recommendation video of books that take one previous story and kind of remake it. I have a bunch of favorites on this list, so let's just jump right in. Alright, so the first book that I want to talk about today is the one that I've read the most recently, and that is Thorn by Jananie. And this is one that I was really excited about when I started reading it because I just love the writing style and I just kind of fell into this fantasy world. It really does feel like a fairy tale from the get-go, and this is actually a retelling of The Goose Girl, which is a German fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. So I've actually never read or heard the story of The Goose Girl before reading this, but I really enjoyed this. I think it took the concept of the Goose Girl and the story and just made something really fun and new with it. This book is very magical but really does feel like a fairy tale, and I loved the main character Alira. The book starts off with her kind of being neglected and unloved by her family, mostly her mother and her brother, and they really don't treat her very well, and it's kind of that classic fairy tale opening. But the book and the fairy tale kind of take an interesting turn. So her mother sets her up to be betrothed with a prince from a faraway land. His name is Kestrin in the book, and that is kind of going on when our main character Alira is cursed by an evil sorceress. So the sorceress kind of robs Alira of her identity and her physical appearance, but Alira kind of jumps on this opportunity and takes it to kind of run away and become a goose girl. And so she runs away from all these responsibilities that have been clutching at her and the fact that she was supposed to marry this man that she doesn't even know. But as she gets to learn more about his kingdom and about him and just all the things going on, her mind starts to change a bit. And she has to step up in a way that she never thought she would want to or needed to. I really enjoyed this book. I just love the atmosphere of it. The main character was really great. And it's also just a really mysterious kind of read. And it really gave me vibes of like Gail Carson Levine stories from when I was younger. So that was a really great aspect. All right, the next book that I want to recommend, or series that I want to recommend, is a YA classic, and that is Cinder by Marissa Mayer, or The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Mayer. So this is a whole series of fairy tale retellings, ones that are set in a sci-fi future. So this is set very far in the future, and our main character Cinder, and this is a retelling of Cinderella if you could not tell. Our main character Cinder is a 16-year-old girl, and she also happens to be a cyborg. She has a stepmother and stepsisters. She's never really been loved, and she lives in a futuristic version of China, so in New Beijing. And in this future, cyborgs are kind of considered subclass humans, and so she's always kind of been treated in that way. And then amidst all this, there is a prince named Prince Kai who comes to her market booth where she does like repairs on androids and asks her to repair his longtime android that carries a very top secret message that may be of national importance and security. There is also a whole aspect of like evil queens on the moon and just a bunch of fairy tale characters kind of coming together in this new and fresh, interesting way. So highly recommend this one. It is so much fun. The cast of characters is just so endearing, and each of the books kind of follows a different fairy tale main character, but the stories connect over each book, so you are getting one full conclusion at the end. But yeah, this is one of my favorites from when I was younger, so I highly recommend. All right, the next book that I want to recommend today is The Wrath in the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. This is a longtime favorite of mine, and this is a retelling of 1001 Nights, or Arabian Nights, the Persian epic full of fairy tales and stories. And this book takes the frame narrative of 1001 Nights as its kind of basis for the story. So in 1001 Nights, it follows this princess who is taken by this king. He takes a different bride every night and kills them in the morning. And so in order to save herself when she is taken as his bride, she starts telling him a story the night of their wedding. And as soon as she finishes one story, she'll quickly begin another before the night ends, but doesn't finish that story. So the king is forced to keep her alive another night so that he can hear the rest of the story. But this book is kind of a little bit different. It takes that concept. There is an 18-year-old boy king, the Caliph of Khorasan, and he is taking a bride every night and kind of killing her off the next morning. And so our main character Shahrazad has had one of her dearest friends fall victim to this bride killing, and so she volunteers herself to become the next bride. She is determined to keep herself alive, and she kind of does this similar kind of gimmick with stories, but things get a little bit different, and this book does make its own take on the story, so that was really interesting. And overall, this is just a really lushly, beautifully written book. The romance was just so great, and the descriptions of food are just to die for, and there are just some really great side characters as well that I just found absolutely endearing. So highly recommend if you wanted a lush fantasy with a really great slow burn romance. All right, the next book that I want to recommend is a very new favorite of mine, and that is Anna K by Jenny Lee. So this isn't strictly a fairy tale retelling, this is a retelling or a re-rendering of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. So that is a kind of classic Russian novel, and this is a modern YA take on that book. Anna Karenina has a huge cast of characters, and you're seeing all of the complexities of their lives, and this book is no different. This is set in New York in kind of high society. The characters and their interactions definitely give off a Gossip Girl vibe, but the book is a lot of fun, and it follows our main character Anna K, who returns to the city to be with her brother and help him out with a bit of a problem that he's run into, and ends up catching the eye of the city's heartthrob, who everyone calls Count Vronsky, which is the name of one of the main characters in Anna Karenina. And this book follows a really dramatic and intense love story, but also each of the characters kind of going through their own versions of a love story and seeing how those kind of come together. This is a really well done novel, and it doesn't feel like a usual young adult book, and overall just has a really interesting scope, and I absolutely loved it. So highly recommend if you kind of wanted to dip into a classic but didn't want to actually read a classic. This is a great one. All right, the next book that I'm going to recommend is a longtime favorite of mine, and it's actually a retelling of a myth, and that is The Star-Touched Queen by Roshini K. So this is actually a rendering of the Hades and Persephone myth of Greek mythology, but with Hindu mythology kind of infused in there. This takes place in an Indian-inspired fantasy world, and it follows our main character Maya, who is taken away to become the bride of this far-off kingdom that no one's really heard of or really talks about. But since she was young, she's been followed by this horoscope that she will bring death and destruction upon her family, and she is meant to kind of marry death. And that ends up kind of being what happens. She ends up marrying the Lord of Death, and there is a bit of a romance that kind of goes around there in the similar fashion of Hades and Persephone. But this story really dives deep into Maya's character and her kind of taking control of her own destiny by the end. And it does have hints of the myth of Cupid and Psyche, so you can also kind of see that influence in the book as well. But overall, this is just a really spellbinding, beautiful book, super enchanting and just really, really lush. And the romance is just really nice and slow burny and just the perfect thing that I love. So highly recommend if you're looking for a fantasy read with a strong self-possessed main character and a really funny side character that comes in the middle of the book. Now, I can't recommend a bunch of fairy tale retellings without recommending a Beauty and the Beast retelling, because I feel like that's one of the most popular fairy tales and kind of stories that are retold. So I have two for you today. First is Of Beast and Beauty by Stacey J. This is one that I read a really long time ago, and it's sort of a sci-fi fantasy take on Beauty and the Beast. It takes place in the domed city of Yuan, and our main character is a blind princess who is raised to be a sacrifice for the city's vitality. So she will one day be sacrificed to keep the city within the dome alive and vibrant, while everything outside the dome is kind of a desert and dying. But outside the dome, there is this mutant monster boy named Jem, who was accidentally captured and brought inside the dome, and he's kept as a prisoner. And so within this world, there are people called monstrous who are kind of considered second-class citizens because they have these monstrous aspects, and Jem is one of these people. And so the princess wants to help this banished class of humans, and as she begins to kind of talk to Jem while he's imprisoned, she starts to question everything that she's ever believed, and the two of them end up trying to find the balance between their two worlds. And it is such an interesting take on Beauty and the Beast because the roles are reversed in this version of the story, and it was just so magical but also really, really interesting, especially with the sci-fi and dystopian parts of it, but also has some really interesting discussions of beauty and what it means to be human. And so I thought that that was really thought-provoking. So highly recommend if you kind of wanted a sci-fi dystopian version of a fairy tale. All right, and then the last book that I'm recommending is one that I read very recently, and that is Of Curses and Kisses by Sandhya Menon. This is another one that is kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's set in our modern day, but in kind of an alternate history version of our modern day, where a princess in a kingdom in India named Jaya Rao ends up going to this fancy elite academy in Aspen, Colorado to run away from this PR scandal that happened in her country, and she takes her sister along with her. But they come face to face with this boy named Lord Grey Emerson, who is of the Emerson clan, and the Raos and the Emersons have a history that goes way back to when the British had control of India. And there's a story of the Emersons having stolen a precious ruby gem from Jaya's grandmother or great-grandmother, and so that grandmother put a curse on the Emerson clan for the rest of their generations, and Grey and his father have kind of taken this curse to heart, and so Grey has always lived with this curse over his head and has been cut off from his family because of that, and has lived at this boarding school for most of his life. And so when Jaya shows up at the academy, they come face to face, and this curse comes to life, and things kind of spiral from there, especially when they start falling for each other, as per a good fairy tale. This is a lot of fun, definitely more on the lighthearted side if you wanted a fun fairy tale retelling, and especially if you wanted one that's set in our modern day. All right, but those are all the books that I wanted to recommend today. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love so many of these books, and I personally just love retellings because I think it's just a really interesting way of taking an old story and making it new. But I would love it if you guys would let me know your favorite fairy tale retellings or retellings of other stories in the comments down below. I always love getting your recommendations. But that's about all I got, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode of #EpicBookRecs. Bye!